My guest today is an expert on gaining muscle, losing fat, and athletic performance, one of the most respected and widely followed exercise scientists in the bodybuilding community. 1.8 million YouTube subscribers. Dr. Mike, welcome to the show. Let's talk about some of the challenges you faced.
Well, I really didn't have any challenges. I was raised by a team of butlers, trillionaire background. I'm kidding.
I saw you annihilate Hunter and Roy Evans in the Labrada gym.
They asked for it.
They asked for it.
Hunter is really strong, and that's a great thing because he can move a lot of weight. A ton of the top pros, Hunter included, Nick Walker, etc., they train really well, really meticulous, really good technique.
They really do.
Consistency and momentum are a big part of that. How do I say this in a polite way? You seem like a really nice person, so I'm gonna say this in as nice of a way as I can.
Just be yourself, Mike.
Oh, you don't want to say that. You'll have a lot of editing to do on the back. If you are not able to be decently consistent, any conversation beyond you solving that problem, how many reps, how many sets, which exercise, what's your split, is just a conversation that's pointless to have.
Welcome to the Labrada Show.
Brought to you by Lean Body, the #1 protein shake in gyms across America.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Labrada Show, the podcast that helps you to improve your physical, mental, and spiritual health. My guest today is an expert on gaining muscle, losing fat, and athletic performance. He's the co-founder of Renaissance Periodization. Dr. Mike Israetel holds a PhD in sports physiology from East Tennessee State University and is a former professor of exercise and sports science in the School of Public Health at Temple University in Philadelphia. Dr. Mike has taught courses in nutrition for public health, advanced sports nutrition and exercise, and nutrition and behavior. And Dr. Mike is not only a competitive bodybuilder and a Brazilian jiu-jitsu grappler, but he's also one of the most respected and widely followed exercise scientists in the bodybuilding community. He has over 1.8 million YouTube subscribers that rely on him for no-nonsense sports science content. Dr. Mike, welcome to the show.
It's a huge honor and pleasure to be on. It's weird to be interviewed by you because I've been looking at your magazine stuff since I started lifting, and it's just a very surreal moment for me.
Well, thank you very much for that. And it's been a very interesting last couple of days because you've been here at the Labrada Nutrition Gym, training with my son, pro bodybuilder Hunter Labrada, and his training partner Roy Evans, and we're going to be talking a little bit about that because those guys are big, strong guys. But what I saw you do with your training regimen was extremely interesting. It's something I had not seen before. But before we get to that, let's talk a little bit about your story. So let's talk about about growing up, some of the challenges you faced as you became a sports exercise scientist.
Great. Well, I really didn't have any challenges. I was raised by a team of butlers and a trillionaire background. I'm kidding. So actually, we were chatting a bit earlier about this, but my family immigrated from the former Soviet Union. It was the Soviet Union at the time. I was born in Moscow, Russia. And we came over in 1991, just a few months before the whole thing broke down, and moved to the metropolitan Detroit area.
Wow.
Which had flying cars and the whole thing.
Right.
But compared to Moscow, it was actually an insanely awesome place to live. And so I had to learn a new language. I have a memory of not speaking English, understanding what people are saying to me. And, I went to summer camp and I went to school and all that stuff. And I wasn't very good at school because I had really extreme attention deficit disorder. And so I was terrible at school for most of my childhood up until I was about 15 years old. And I wasn't really involved in a ton of sports. But when I was in my freshman year of high school, still to this day, one of my very best friends, him and I were friends, and it was after school, and he was passing by and I was like, "Hey, do you want to hang out later?" And he's like, "I'm actually going to go try out for the wrestling team." And I was like, "I'll join you, I guess."
Right.
And I probably wouldn't have done it unless that happened. And then getting involved in wrestling, getting involved in sport was something that ended up altering my trajectory for the long term. So I started wrestling, and unrelated, but I finally got medicated enough to understand the things on the chalkboard. So I started doing well at school. And I ended up kind of quitting wrestling every year for reasons I could get into. But what I would do is quit wrestling and start lifting. And then I would lift in the off season all the time. And I actually ended up just falling in love with lifting like crazy through high school. And by the time I got into college, about a year or two into college, I realized like I just actually want to know how to get bigger and stronger.
Right.
And I was already a avid fan of science. And so I was like, listen, I think science is kind of a pretty sure path to the truth. And so I'm going to try to learn as much science as I can to try to get as jacked and strong as I can. And then that journey ended up getting me all the way through a PhD in academics. I became a professor, and the entire time was lifting and getting jacked. And then started competing in bodybuilding shows, not very successfully. And then lately, slightly more successfully, and ended up getting back about 10 years ago into my grappling roots and started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu again.
How's that going?
Super well. It's great. Now my wife's getting into it, and it's just a matter of surviving the household environment for me. I just have to stay just one step ahead, but I don't know if that's working out so well. She's mean, you know.
That's funny.
So now I train in Jiu-Jitsu and I train in bodybuilding, and I've been a professor for a while. I'm not a professor anymore. Take a breather from that. And now I just focus on our YouTube channel at RP. And we have two apps, the Diet Coach app and the Hypertrophy Training app. And I help the engineers design those. And then I just sit in a dark room and wonder where it all went wrong.
Well, Dr. Mike, I could probably accurately say that you're still a professor. You just have a much broader audience, and it's a virtual audience.
Sure. And
I've seen what you can do here firsthand. In fact, I want to segue into asking you about that, because I saw you annihilate Hunter and Roy Evans in the Labrada gym over
They asked for it.
They asked for it. Let's talk about your style of training.
Sure.
Let's talk about what makes it different. I'd just like to hear your take on it.
Yeah. So my style of training can best be summarized probably in the following slightly shortened way. And that is, it's whatever style gets me my best guess of what maximizes the muscle growth stimulus and minimizes injury risk and fatigue. Because, for example, if you have someone doing a deadlift out of the rack, a partial deadlift, and it's for maybe their back, upper back, they could be a situation where that's a lot of stimulus, and maybe you'll grow a lot of muscle. But you have to put 8 plates on each side if you're Hunter size, for example. The amount of fatigue delivered to your body, the amount of acute injury risk, the amount of long-term wear and tear on your joints might also be a number that's quite high. Mm-hmm. So maybe we can figure out a way, I thought to myself a while ago, of maximizing the stimulus while keeping the fatigue kind of as little as possible. Kind of an analogy there is if you're looking for a good deal on a restaurant to eat at, yeah, if you go to fast food, it's real cheap. So the fatigue, quote unquote, is really low. But also the food's maybe not that great, so stimulus is low as well. If you go to a restaurant where rich people go just because other rich people go there, the food might be pretty good, but the prices are just obscene. You ever pay enough for a meal where you're like, there's no way this much money should ever buy you food. This is nonsense. A really great restaurant from just the financial perspective is one, it's like a little hole in the wall you discover, somewhere in Miami where the food is unbelievable, but the prices, it's not super cheap, but they're just really good. Like, you know what, man, they're really on to something here. So that's kind of what we're looking for in training, is to ask the question of, how do we deliver a lot of stimulus to the target muscle? That way I phrase that has its own meaning, because when you're doing an exercise, you have to consider, what muscles am I targeting? Some people will do squats and deadlifts and stuff. They'd be like, what are you training? They're like, well, squats and deadlifts. And like, that's cool and all, but for bodybuilding purposes, you got to have a bit more of a target in mind. So when you're choosing exercises, you're choosing your techniques, you're choosing how much volume you're training, how much frequency, kind of a core unifying principle is, how do we get the most bang for my buck, the most stimulus for the least fatigue? And that does have some downstream consequences as how training will look for many people. And I can definitely talk about those, but that's kind of the core unifying principle of how I look at training.
I noticed when I was watching you train Hunter and Roy that you were very big on stress.
Literally, I was huge, right? Compared to Hunter, I just kind of disappeared.
I tell you, I know I disappear next to Hunter.
For real.
He's a big guy. But I noticed that you really emphasize the stretch position. of the muscle, as the initial position,
Mm-hmm.
and you put, a lot of loading in that. Is there something to that?
Yeah, I think so. So the way I came to the emphasizing the stretch initially is there were some studies almost exclusively on animals, real terrible stuff. They take birds and they put their wings out and they just put weights on them, and the wing is stretched for hours a day. And who
Ouch.
knows what the bird is thinking at that
Sure.
point. Probably something like squawk, squawk. I imagine that's the thought going through its head. But in any case, the results of those studies showed that generating tension at a lengthened muscle position, at a stretch, promoted a lot of muscle growth, much more than you would see from that same amount of tension applied, not in a stretch. And so those studies were done probably in the 1990s. And so when I started training pretty seriously and started appraising myself to the literature, I was like, okay, there's something there. And then I tried it. And what I found experientially was, man, like if I'm doing flies or something and I'm going down halfway, you get a pump, you get some stuff, you get some soreness. But if you do a fly and really expand the chest, all that crazy deep stretch, you get way more pumped, way more sore. And if someone's like, hey, do you feel your pecs? You're like, dude, why are you even asking?
Right.
It's like if someone flies out of their car and hits a telephone pole in an accident, you don't run up to them and be like, are you okay? Like, of course I'm not okay. So to me, it was kind of phase one was, okay, reading the literature, stretch seems important, potentially, although animal models don't always transfer to humans.
Sure.
And then from experience, I noticed like on the leg press, if I go lower, it just messes my quads up like crazy. And another benefit is that I don't have to use a crazy amount of load. Like I use half the weight I normally do into leg press. I go twice as deep. I seemingly get even better muscle growth benefits. But I mean, with 4 plates on a side versus 8, the acute injury probability is just different.
It
If
sure
something
is.
goes wrong with 4 plates, you're probably going to be okay.
Right.
Something goes wrong with 8 plates, that's between you and God at that
you
point.
are in trouble.
Is have you been a good person in other parts of your life is what determines that. So that was kind of phase 2. And then phase 3 was actually just in the last year or so. There are a couple of folks doing great work summarizing literature. One of them is Dr. Milo Wolf. He's great. Folks can look him up on YouTube. And they've actually done a number of studies now testing different parts of the range of motion, and real clever studies. So they'll do a bicep curl. One group of people will train just from the bottom end all the way up to a third. Another group of people will train from the top end to the last third. And one group of people will train with the full range of motion. And it's showing time and time again with a very near consensus for the research that that bottom stretch position is magical. Not literally magical, but it does cause substantial, notable, measurable, and real world different amounts of muscle growth.
I'm just wondering out loud, Dr. Mike, and maybe you can help me with this, but I'm just thinking when I hear you say that, physiologically, like what is going on inside that muscle? Is it that it is sending a more of a signal in that stretch loaded position than it would in other parts of the exercise? In other words, what causes that? Or do you think that it's just the physiological disruption of the muscle cells at the bottom in the stretch position?
Great question. The short answer is we just don't know definitively yet. The slightly longer answer is we used to hypothesize that there was a receptor in the muscle cells for tension, and it could tell when there was tension and could tell when there wasn't. And as much tension as you put in, it kind of told the rest of the cell, like, hey, this is pretty serious, grow muscle.
Mm-hmm.
But what we're realizing now is there are probably numerous different classes of receptors, and some of them might be attuned to both stretch and tension, some just to tension, and everything in between. There may be independent mechanisms. Some of your molecules that help your muscle stay integrated and contract that really change in a big way from stretch to contracted. Other ones change a huge amount. There's a molecule in there, I believe, called titin, to the titin and nebulin complex. And when they stretch, they completely change shape. And there are parts of these little molecular detector machines in them that go like, hey, stuff's happening. And maybe that combination of stretch and load kind of integrates in the cell nucleus as like, okay, take this seriously, grow even more. We also know it's maybe not literally the stretch, but at a longer muscle length. So you don't have to feel the crazy stretch. So even if you go with flies and you go ultra deep to get the stretch, that might be a great thing. But even if you go down here, you don't feel the stretch, but it's technically a long muscle length versus stopping here or something. Just going in a longer muscle length seems to provide a huge amount more hypertrophy than going in the shorter. So there's some kind of molecular sensing mechanism, probably mechanisms plural in there, detecting, okay, we have tension, we have stretch. There's probably ones for metabolites, like the lactic acid you get, the burn in animal studies that's been shown to cause hypertrophy. If you actually just inject lactic acid into muscle cells, they grow more, which is not a surprise because it seems like your body has a few different mechanisms for determining when your muscles have received a challenge. It's the metabolites that are in there. It's the high tension, the proximity to failure. The closer to failure you get, generally the more growth you get. So your body probably has a few different mechanisms of basically being like, hey man, this is going poorly for us. You need to get bigger
we need
for
to
this.
adapt.
And one of them is this kind of stretch mediated or long muscle length mechanism. Now, I don't know evolutionarily what the logic for that is. It could be that if you're having an easy time with something, you follow through the motion. Let's say you're, I don't know, fighting an animal or something like that. If you're at short muscle lengths producing force, that probably means you're winning. If you're at long muscle lengths, everything's stretched out and you're trying to keep this crazy chimp away from you, then maybe you're not doing so well.
That's interesting. I've never heard it described that way.
Maybe that's a thing.
Yeah.
And so at long muscle lengths, you're usually not in a crazy mechanical advantage position to move as much weight. I mean, you can try it yourself. What can you fly from here to here versus here to here? My God, like 900 pounds from here to here. Here it's 50. And so whatever that mechanism is, we're still finding out. There's a lot of great research occurring, but we do know something better than the mechanism. And that is study after study after study, the people that do training at a more long muscle length, more of a stretch, they just grow more muscle almost every time, even than a full range of motion. I was a huge advocate for a long time of full range of motion. I still am in many regards, that the research on lengthened partials is so real. I can't ignore it. And I've tried it in my own training. Man, it just worked. Calf raises, for example, if you have to lock out every single calf raise at the top, you'll notice that you get close to failure. And it's that lockout top part that's limiting you. You can get the stretch and still produce force down there. You just can't fully lock out. So you stop the set. You say, okay, that's failure. You write down, 18 reps in your RPA hypertrophy app, and that's great. But if after that full range set, you continue the set and you do only bottom end partials until you can't do those anymore, it seems to be that drives more growth. Drives more growth in the scientific studies. But also, from my experience, it just causes a totally different pump and a totally different level of soreness. And I think I'm one of the few researchers that thinks the pump and soreness are correlated to growth. I still think I'm going to win that bet in a couple of years. But every single time I do something ultra effective in the gym, as science indicates, I get crazy pump and I get crazy sore. And to me, those are really, really good signs.
That's the good sign. That's where the rubber meets the road, as they say.
For sure.
Hey guys, I hope that you were watching Mike demonstrate that fly movement and saw how great a shape that he's in. I'm in studio with him, and he looks amazing. And I want to remind you guys to check out Renaissance Periodization online, and he's got an app. You want to get into a lot more detail with him. This is the go-to guy. So, Mike, I saw some of the exercises yesterday. They started with weight resistance, not a lot, but they ended up with body weight resistance. Mm-hmm. And I got to tell you that I was just floored when I saw Hunter doing a body weight squat and his legs were shaking uncontrollably, unable to finish one more repetition. Step us through, one exercise, one set of an exercise. What goes through setting that up?
Yeah. So Hunter is really strong, really, really big. And that's a great thing because he can move a lot of weight. It's awesome. It's cool to be strong. It's also a great thing for another reason. When you have really big, strong muscles, they fatigue a lot and they have trouble reducing their own fatigue. When Hunter's muscles get tired, there's so much waste product built up in his quads, for example. He doesn't just hop, skip out of the gym after a set close to failure of leg presses. What we had him do was first we did hamstrings, then we did 3 sets of leg press. But these are sets with rest pauses built into them, so It's just really terrible. basically an average about 15 reps per set.
Mhm.
Heavy weight, full range of motion, the whole thing. And then after that, we had him and the guys do one set of squats with a safety bar. By then, their quads were so messed up. And these guys are huge. They're strong, very many fast twitch muscle fibers. They don't recover really well. They're so messed up already that quads are by far the limiting factor on the squat. And just one set of basically 10 with 135 pounds in
I
the
know.
squat.
It was just blowing my mind.
They were also blown because they were like, what the hell is going on? My legs don't work.
Yeah, how am I failing with 135 pounds?
100%.
It's like,
Yep. Because you'll have a certain level of fatigue built up in your muscles. After that last set of leg press, you warm for the squat, the fatigue slowly starts to come down. You start that next working set of squats. You just haven't recovered much yet. Now, systemically, you have your breathing normally, you feel strong again, but your quads are kind of broken. And the rule there is basically, like, this sounds messed up, is kind of kick them while they're down. Don't let them recover too much.
right,
Because if you keep them close to failure,
right.
that's where a lot of growth stimulus occurs. You get a ton of metabolites in there. The burn is crazy. All of the parts of the muscle that are still active are trying to produce as much tension as possible, but they're having a real hard time because there's so many metabolites in the mix. And so you get this situation where you can take a muscle really close to failure again if you don't rest a ton shortly after. We had them rack that 135 pounds after they were done with it and start right away into body weight squats.
Right.
And it turns out that when you rack a squat that you're basically close to failure at, and someone 5 seconds later has you do body weight squats, your quads are like, well, hold on a second. I can't keep up with this. Right away, they're close to failure. Another benefit is Hunter weighs 290 pounds. A body weight squat for him is a little bit different than someone who started lifting at 110, right? Exactly. Me and you and everyone else who's mortal. But so he's got these huge muscles that are really, really poorly fatigue resistant. And you smash a ton of volume into them. You break them down a lot. And then all of the work after that is really just kind of icing on the cake. To make a really stupid on the spot analogy, it's kind of like if you pre-feed a big eater a huge meal, crazy amount of food, but someone doesn't see that. Let's say you have a relative coming in for Thanksgiving dinner and they came a little late. Their flight got delayed. And they watch Jim Bob, who they usually eat in 4 plates, but he didn't see that he ate 3.5 plates. And he's sitting there at the dinner table and dessert comes out. Like, Jimbo, you ready to hit dessert? And he's like, I guess. And you'll be, here's one cookie. And he has trouble finishing the cookie. And you're like, what happened to Jim Bob? Where's his appetite? But you didn't see that stuff he did before.
Right.
So if you can really cook someone on an exercise or two, really isolate the muscle, whatever compound movements you do after, you just don't need hundreds of pounds because the muscles are so messed up. You kick them and you kick them and you kick them. And when muscles are already messed up, they have a ton of internal fatigue built up. They're probably more sensitive rep for rep by a long shot to muscle growth. So now you have an easy route to more gains.
It's fascinating to me what you're saying. So would it be accurate to say that you try to get the athlete to the point of muscular failure as fast as possible, but then keep them at that failure threshold for as long as you can with subsequent sets? So then others, they're near failure the majority of the time after that first all-out set.
And it doesn't even have to be one all-out set. So for the leg press, we did 3 sets and we got close to failure with every set, but not to failure. But after 3 sets of 15 or so reps with as much weight as Hunter was doing with that technique, then every set was rest pause, or what we call nowadays myo reps. That means the number of approaches to near failure within each set was probably about 3, something like 9 approaches to failure, which is really the quads at that point want a cigarette break. They're not interested in doing any more work.
Right.
And then once you have them really fatigued, then it's the icing on the cake. Then light squats are all you need, exactly to your point. Once they're near failure, getting them back close to failure is just not that hard. Another stupid analogy, you run a marathon. You're completely winded and completely messed up, but you're in good shape. You're a runner. I run a marathon and then I give you 10 seconds of rest and I go, okay, run 200 meters. You're going to look pathetic and people are going to go, what the hell's wrong with that guy?
He looks like he's jogging.
Right. I thought he was an elite guy. You'd be like, well, you didn't see what happened before.
Yeah.
Once you push someone close to their limits, if you give them a big break, you got to bring them back up. I mean, if we gave Hunter 30 minutes after leg press before squat, he would eat 3 or 4 plates on a side to do any kind of work. But That's not a wrong way to train. That's totally cool. But you end up loading the spine a little bit more. It's more systemic fatigue, because systemic fatigue is much more a factor of not how quickly you do something, but how much total work you do. And so we can reduce the total work a little bit, thus reducing the fatigue. But by catching people when they're pre-exhausted, for lack of a better term, we can really get in there and again, kick them while they're down. And I literally kicked Hunter while he was down. He couldn't do anything about it. I'd normally never fight a guy that size, but when you can't walk, I'm winning that fight. I'm kidding. You didn't see the fist fight we had in there?
No, I did not see that.
Huge hands.
Now, on that note, for those of our viewers that want to see this workout that you did, where can they watch that and when?
Yes. So it's going to be the RP Strength YouTube.
Okay.
Just type in RP Strength on YouTube. It'll come up. And when is an interesting question for our head YouTube editor guy, Scott, the video guy is his name. This is interesting. He was given a last name of the video guy. And
he never shook it.
He never shook it. But that's going to be out, I would say, in the next several months.
Okay.
As we have a long queue of folks. But then Scott makes strategic decisions as to when to release a video. But every Monday on the channel, we have a training video. And we filmed another video with Hunter and the guys where they did arms. And then the next day they did legs. And we might have in a future video where they do back. And the guys are probably sick of us at this point and don't want anything. As a matter of fact, I kind of want to text Hunter later and be like, how do your legs feel?
How do you feel?
It's kind of facetious.
I would be curious.
Yes. I'd be like, shut up. That's all I get back. Like,
that's great.
Yeah.
So I know that from talking with you that you have said that it really doesn't matter up to a point how many reps as long as you go to failure. So anywhere from 5 to 30 reps, I think is what you said.
Correct. Within that borderline of 5 to 30. So first of all, 5 and 30 are convenient cutoffs. If you do 4 reps and stop, it's not like your muscles are like, sorry, not enough, no growth. It's not a government office where if you don't fill a form out all the way, nothing processed.
Sure.
And it doesn't just cut off at 30. But the studies they've done show that anything much more than 40 reps, you just have to do significantly more sets to get the same growth as if you went heavier. The way I like to analogize it is the nucleus of the muscle cell, kind of the control center. It gets messages from the rest of the cell as to whether or not to grow or how much to grow. And the messages come in maybe like an analogy is the sound of a voice. So the heaviness of the load is how loud you're talking. How many reps you do is how many times you say the thing. And let's pretend that the nucleus is like, let's pretend the nucleus is like a slightly misbehaving toddler. You can't just tell them once. You got to tell them a few times. Now, there's a few ways to get a toddler to do what you want. One is 30 times to be like, okay, Frank, you got to clean up your room. Okay, Frank, because you're never saying it, but if you say it a lot, he'll get the idea. Or 5 times, you really yell at him, Frank, clean up your room. And then he gets the message.
Sure.
Anything between 5 and 30,
okay.
5 really loud, 30 not so loud is great. But let's say you do 2 reps. Well, if you yell at Frank the toddler twice, he's just like, oh, okay. And he sort of starts cleaning up his room, but then he gets distracted. It's just not enough of a total message, the enough total volume, the amount of total stimulus for growth. 2 reps. Can you imagine doing a set of 2 and be like, that's it, we're growing. You leave the gym. Someone's like, was that a warm up or is he going to come back? Like, nope, he thinks that's enough. And it's just not enough reps. It's going to drive some growth, but not a ton. North of 30 reps, let's say 40, 45 reps, it's like saying, hey, Frank, clean up your room. Frank, clean up. It's so quiet. He might not even hear you. And so it is really true that fundamentally heavy loading is what grows muscle. Heavy is a range. It's relative. It doesn't mean you're most. But if you start getting to a weight that you can just do this with kind of forever, like imagine you went to the gym and you got the 5-pound dumbbells to curl. How many reps would you have to do to get close to failure? I mean, like
more than 30.
An amount that you're not interested in, right?
Sure.
And so between 5 and 30, they've done numerous studies. If you have 2 groups of people, some train with sets of 5, some with sets of 15, some with sets of 30. 3 groups, good God, what am I saying? And you have someone look at just their muscle growth, but you don't tell them which group is what, they can't tell. It's statistically an equivalent amount of muscle, at least over several months. Now, that's cool from a theoretical perspective and lets us know that if you see someone doing a set of 5 in the squat, you're like, all right, that's good. You see someone doing a set of 25 in leg press, you're like, okay, that's good. You're not like, oh, that guy's an idiot. He's doing it wrong. But there are lots of other theoretical and practical considerations as to how to actually choose load. For example, Does a set of 5-ish drive a lot of muscle growth stimulus? Yes. How safe is a set of 5 compared to a set of 25? Well, gee whiz, you don't have to be a rocket scientist. You are a bodybuilder, you walk out a heavy squat for a set of 5. Some things could zig when they're supposed to zag, and that's not great. Now, usually that's fine. Bodybuilders are hardy people. But maybe 2 weeks pre-contest isn't the time to do heavy sets of 5. And I'm sure in your career, you've seen a lot of dumb stuff go on. Or you look at someone, you're like, should you be doing
career-ending injuries that I've seen?
100%. I've seen a bunch of that myself.
And I think that we're all more prone to injury before competition because we have a lot less body fat. We have the added fatigue, from all of the overtraining that the guys typically are engaged in leading up to the show. And this is one of the things that really, jumped out at me about your program is that it seems to me like this would be an ideal way for pre-contest bodybuilders to train.
When we train guys pre-contest, we take the average repetition range and move it a little bit higher to make sure that we get that little extra buffer zone of let's not do any career-ending injury kind of stuff. So for sets of 25 reps, you're safer. However, there's another consideration and a few others still. One of them is, what is the limiting factor for that exercise for low reps versus high reps? For example, a set of 8 in the squat. If you're reasonably in decent shape, praying people agree with this here, you're not going to gas out. It's not going to be the cardio that limits you in the squat. It's going to be your quads if you have good technique. So sets of 8 in the squat, limited by the quads, they get all the stimulus they need, no problem. But a set of 25 in the squat,
you're going to
unless
be breathing.
you're Tom Platz,
you're going to be breathing.
You're not going to feel because of your quads. You're just going to start passing out because you can't breathe anymore and you'll have to rack the weight.
Right.
However, on a leg press, a set of 25, because you're braced, you get to sit in the machine, a set of 25 could work. It's actually your quads that limit you on the leg press. But, a set of 5 in the leg press, it's like, that's kind of really heavy to do with slightly more isolation movement. You're going to, if the weight gets a little weird on you in a set of 5 or a set of 8 in a squat, you can sit back a little more. You could sit forward. You kind of feel out how your knees are doing. In the leg press, a set of 5 to 8, which way are you going to go? That weight is coming down in one direction, and you have no degrees of freedom. And if your knees aren't happy that day, you're going to be real, real sad that day. So based on the exercise itself, for the average muscle group, for the average individual, 5 to 30 is roughly equivalent. But based on the exercise, it starts to get a little bit different. So someone could say, like, you do like noodles better or rice better? I would say, so first of all, there's some variation in there. I don't like the same thing all the time, but also, what cuisine am I eating? If it's Asian cuisine, they're just better at everything. So it's noodles and rice. If it's Italian cuisine, rice is cool, but I'm going to take some noodles, and vice versa. You got to lean into what is best for what.
Sure.
And that goes even further for individuals. Some people seem to have more proxies of stimulus, get better pumps, more soreness, more progression and strength over time from lower reps. Sets of 5 to 10, 10 to 15. You give them higher reps and they just get tired and not much else happens.
Right.
Other individuals love high rep training. It checks every box. They go lower reps, their joints start hurting. They don't really feel anything. Imagine if I had you do a heavy single in the squat. I'd be like, hey, Lee, you like your quads are blowing up? You're like, not really. My knees are blowing up, and not my quads.
Right.
And so a lot of times there's tons of individual difference. And the last thing I'll say on this, there's even individual difference within an individual between different muscles. So for me personally, for example, for my back, higher reps, sets of 15 to 25 reps, cook my back amazingly. Lower reps, sets of 5 to 10,
not so much.
It just feels like I'm doing something,
sure,
but there's not a ton of pump. There's not a ton of source. I can't really feel my back. Not great. But for my chest is like seemingly purely fast twitch muscle fiber or something. If I do a set of 25 for my chest, I don't even get a pump. I just get tired. Right. It's weird. I do a set of 8 in the incline bench. Oh my God, one set, I can get sore for 3 days off one set done properly. And so what I encourage people to do is understand that anywhere between 5 and 30 reps is awesome in a general sense, but use some of those cues about how your own body works and is responding to select the rep ranges that seem to work better for you. And there's not such a thing as there's just one right answer. Try a bunch of different stuff. and it's going to take you years to learn your body. I'm 40 years old as of a few days ago.
Congratulations.
I started, thank
Happy
you so
birthday.
much. Thank you so much. I started training when I was 14, let's say 15 for convenience, really close. So I've been training for 25 years. Every single week, I learn something new, not just about science in general for training, but about my own body and how it responds. And so sometimes I get the question on podcasts of, what's a thing that you'd want to tell yourself? If you could go back when you were 15, what would you tell yourself about training that would help you? And my facetious for comedy answer is like, I think everything. I would learn sports science. Can you imagine? Like,
Sure.
Imagine saying, like, hey, what would you have to tell yourself back in your competitive years? Like, but I wish I knew everything I knew now. It's not just one thing.
It's not just one thing. That's right.
It's totally cool to have a good plan together, but feel your body, feel how you're responding, and don't buy into dogma. It's all sets of 8. It's all sets of 15. Nonsense. There's a broad range. Try a bunch of stuff. See what works.
I like that, Mike. Not to buy into the dogma. And that was one of the things that I found out early on in my bodybuilding career, because when I started in the late 70s, it was the workout of the day was 20 sets.
The Arnold days, the Gold's Gym days.
8 to 10 reps, 20 sets. And then along comes Mike Mentzer, and Elliot Darden and Arthur Jones, and they start pushing the high intensity approach.
Mm-hmm.
And I adopted that because it just logically, it made sense to me. My background is as a civil engineer. So it just made sense to me, it's like, this is logical what they're saying. So that was one of the early training styles that I adopted. One of the things that was big back in the day also was the concept of bulking up. And, some would take it to a ridiculous extreme.
I did that.
I think we've all done that in the past, but they would gain 30, 40 pounds of muscle only to have to lose, 30, 40 pounds of body weight, only have to lose 30 pounds of excess fat when they're getting ready for the show. And so segue into this, I've heard you say before, that maybe it makes more sense to get lean before putting on, or going through a muscle gaining phase. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. That's on the note of things I wish I could have told myself when I was 15 is don't ever do a huge bulk. I have to dry out a ton for shows, more than most people, because like my love handle area has so much excess skin. It just fills up with water. I have to dry out like crazy to not have love handles on stage and a very low % body fat. It's just it's the stretch skin. There's so many downsides, health, well-being. Right. I mean, just like not looking your best for no good reason at all. So the super bulking thing is kind of a disaster. However, one of the number one reasons to get a little leaner before you bulk, and there's a ton of reasons. One of the number one reasons is what I like to call the concept of a runway. Let's say we have a % fat that you already know for yourself is your top end limit. Let's say if you're a competitive bodybuilder, that top end is roughly 15% body fat. For many males, that's going to be around that number. Why is it the top end? North of that, you don't even see your six pack anymore. So you have no idea how to judge any kind of visual progress.
Sure.
Once you get fat enough,
you can't see anything.
Figuring out if you're getting a lot fatter is tough, because it's all fat yesterday, I'm fat today, fat tomorrow, it's all fat. Who knows? Right. If you still have some semblance of details and you start to see them disappear, you go, oh, okay, time to back up. So if you've lost details, that's no good. Another one is literally physical performance in the gym. You see guys in the deep off season, they're gassing out like crazy during exercises.
I've seen that.
And it's not great because it's like, dude, the reason you didn't do another 4 reps on your leg press wasn't because your quads were tired. It's because your soul was tired. Yeah. Your cardiovascular system is limiting you. And that's no good because the science is that muscles grow the most when they're locally close to failure. But if the muscles aren't locally close to failure, nothing's going to happen. It's kind of like this. Imagine you run a factory here, you got a factory floor. Imagine that you're just not producing as many Labrada shakes as normal. And someone calls you like, what's up with the factory? Now, there could be maybe one of two things going on. One is you're like, dude, my employees have worked like crazy. They're just tired. Local fatigue. Good reason. But the other one is like, actually the shipments of raw materials just aren't coming down the freeway because there's a traffic jam. That's that systemic cardio thing.
Right.
So if someone's asking you, like, is your factory really gunning to make all the shakes? You'd be like, no, it's not. That's a problem. They don't pay you for how many trucks come down the delivery ramp.
Right.
They pay you for the shakes going out. Same way, your body gets you to grow muscle if you push the muscle to its limits.
That's right.
Not your cardiovascular system.
You don't want your cardiovascular system to become the rate limiting factor.
Exactly. And when you're fat enough, that's just what happens. I've been there myself. That's a thing. You don't want that. Another one is for psychological reasons. And people say this is a minor concern. I kind of tend to agree because I'm from that hardcore school of like whatever it takes kind of bodybuilding.
Sure.
So like if I had to get fat and it actually worked, I would. And
Sure.
I did because I thought it actually worked. But there's something to say for if you can in your off season hit a front double and just friggin' look like a bodybuilder.
Right.
You love training. You know, the training's all about getting that pump and a couple
Sure.
veins and you just love it. That if you look like kind of a block of cheese, for lack of a better word, I mean, man,
it just kind of takes the fun out of it.
It really does.
Yeah.
And
why are we doing it in the first place?
100%.
Yeah.
You know, you could sit on a plane next to someone you haven't seen before and they just strike up a conversation and they're like, so are you like, you doing some wrestling? You're like a sumo guy? And you're like, oh my God. Like, believe it or not, I'm a bodybuilder. They're like, oh, okay. They do that fake smile. They turn away. You're like, yeah, okay. I can't get this fat anymore.
Right.
The last thing is health. And for folks who are drug-free, it's an issue.
Mm-hmm.
For folks who are using performance-enhancing substances, it's not a game anymore. Your heart, your kidneys, your liver, your blood pressure, they're dealing with enough as it is.
The stress is just crazy.
Exactly. And to me, getting overly fat
It doesn't help.
with those supplements
Yeah.
is a non-starter.
Yeah.
It's real serious
It's a health
stuff.
hazard.
100%. It's like if you don't buckle your seatbelt when you're driving a parking lot at 20 miles an hour, whatever. If you're in a Formula One car going 200 and you don't buckle your seatbelt, you've just lost your mind. There's no saving it at that point.
That's
so
right.
when I see guys who are on plenty of gear in the off season get real bloated, I'm like, you do know, like there's many years of your life left, hypothetically.
You know, it's funny, Mike, because I tell Hunter and his training partners and all of the younger generation of bodybuilders, you know, I tell them there's life after bodybuilding.
Yeah.
You know, I'm proof that there's life after bodybuilding, you know, and it's like running your competitive bodybuilding is like running your car in second gear at 90 miles an hour. You can get away with that for a while, you know, but if you're not careful, you'll blow a gearbox, you know, and so you don't want to take those kind of chances with your body. But let me ask you something, you know, in terms of bodybuilders getting ready for competition, do you think it's possible for them to actually gain muscle in the weeks leading up to the competition? Or do you think that they're just at a disadvantage with the lower calories and that kind of thing?
There are two ways that I know for sure that you can do that.
Okay.
You can even do them in combination. I don't recommend it necessarily. One is you just don't take your training very seriously in the off season. You know, like the term off season, interestingly enough, from a kind of sport history perspective is fun because it was initially coined in baseball where the guys would play and they would train and their training really was mostly just playing. And then afterwards they would like go sell refrigerators door to door. It was off. They didn't train. It was the on season and the off season.
That's right.
In bodybuilding, we've since realized that like you take breaks and you have to take care of your body mentally, physically, etc. But those breaks are generally measured in weeks and not in months or quarters of a year. But some folks really undertrain. And then when they get a competition in their sights, 16 weeks out, they start training hard. Those guys can definitely gain muscle into the show, but they're not maximizing their off season.
Right. Okay.
The other way is you normally either don't take drugs or you take very low doses. And then into a show, you ramp up the drugs like wild. Yeah, you can absolutely gain muscle and lose fat at the same time.
Right.
Does that mean you're maximizing your growth in the off season? Probably also not the case. So if you're full send bodybuilding, doing your very best, you might be able to grow a little bit of muscle into your contest prep, but not a ton. If you're growing a ton of muscle in your contest prep under exactly what you said, the low calorie and high fatigue conditions, if you just did the same stuff but ate food in your off season, you would get really big. And it's much easier to conserve muscle that you've already built than to build new muscle. So you kind of want to build new muscle in a situation where you have low fatigue, plenty of food, and then conserve it when the stuff gets hard in pre-contest.
Yeah, I 100% agree with what you said. And, you know, and a thought occurred to me while you were saying that. I think that pre-contest should be approached as a muscle retention phase.
Yes.
While you strip away any body fat or excess water.
Sure.
But what happens is because as bodybuilders, some of us are knuckleheads. We go into the gym and it's like, oh, I got a competition coming up. I got to train harder and harder and harder, even as the competition, comes along. And what ends up happening is that we end up overtrained.
Yep.
So that leads me to this question. How important do you think are off days?
I actually made a video a little while ago about team no days off. I don't know if you know, this is kind of a meme on the internet.
I actually saw it with the Alan Richardson, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah. That was also mentioned.
Yeah.
And, first of all, we all know from basic physiology that you grow the vast majority of your muscle when you're resting, not when you're training.
Right.
Sort of that kind of like theoretically throws a little stick in the spokes of the idea that like train as much as possible. You're like, I don't know if that makes a ton of sense. The other thing is, technically speaking, if you look at your total amount of volume and intensity you do over the week, that's by far the most important. If you train all 7 days, but you do a little less, or if you train 5 days, but you do a little more and take 2 days off, you're going to get similar levels of accumulated fatigue over time and the similar levels of sustainability. However, I think there is something pretty profound and meaningful about actually taking days off that's psychological.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just psychological, but it's also logistical. The act of driving to the gym is stressful. The act of seeing people in the gym and chatting with people isn't stressful. If you're an introvert, it's real stressful. If you're like me, you can just talk to people all day long and they just pray you shut the hell up, but you never do. Then they stop being friends with you. And in any case, going to the gym, even for any kind of workout, driving around, planning the workout into your day, that's a thing. And so if you can have a few days from the week that you don't train at all, you save a lot of fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
And psychologically, you save a ton of fatigue because that's another day that you don't have to turn it on, because you only have so much of that oomph in there. If you turn it on every day, your body's like, bro, do we even like this anymore?
Right.
But I'm a big fan of at least 1 day off a week.
I love what you said about the psychological piece of it, because I'm a total believer in that, and especially when you're competing, you're leading in the days up to a show, the psychological deprivation that you can feel with the diet. And then you combine that with the stress that you're putting on your body in the gym. It's not a good combination.
No.
And I think that it taxes the central nervous system, in such a way. And in extreme cases, you got the cortisol overload and all the other stuff.
Oh, yeah. And so I think 1 day off a week at least is a good idea.
I would agree.
But there's something magical about 2 consecutive days off. Because if you actually like bodybuilding, which is really the only good reason to do bodybuilding, nobody starts bodybuilding like, oh, I'm going to make a lot of money.
You better love it.
It's going to be so easy too.
You better love it.
You better love it. And so 2 days of no training later, you just can't wait to get in there and smash stuff.
That's right.
But if you train 7 days a week,
actually looking forward to it.
Right?
I love that.
7 days a week, 6 weeks later, someone's like, you excited for your workout? You're like, dude, I don't even know which way's up anymore.
I think that's really important. I think it's one of those keys to consistency, and I've heard you speak about how important consistency is and how the results that you get from consistent training stack up, and lead to muscular growth over a period of time, which I think is one of the problems that people have, is that they typically don't stick with the program long enough. They're not consistent.
Oh boy. I mean, actually, to really quickly thread the needle on the earlier topic of the getting leaner first before bulking, it actually threads into consistency really quick, because what you want is that concept of a runway. You'd pick your top end body fat, let's say it's 15%, and you go, okay, how lean can I get and still function pretty well, so that as I slow bulk back up to 15%, I can give my body enough consistent small amount of excess calories per day and take the longest time I can in providing great training and nutrition over and over and over. Because you can gain some muscle in 4 good weeks. But if you dieted down to 13% body fat and then 4 weeks later you're at 15 again, what are you going to do? You're done. You got to go back. But if you start at 8% body fat, I mean, it might take you months to get up to 15%, even if you do. And that's months of a small surplus in calories, high quality training, and consistency. You don't grow muscle overnight. You grow some muscle over 4 weeks, but not a ton. You grow muscle over weeks and weeks and weeks and months. And there's a momentum factor to that too, once you figured out what exercises you like, you figured out your techniques, you know what loads you're using, you add a rep here and there, you add a few pounds here and there, you add a rep, and you're going. Someone's like, what are you leg pressing today? You're like, I know exactly what I'm leg pressing. I did that last week. I'm going to do 1 rep more and 5 pounds more. And you stack the chips little by little by little. That runway you build for yourself of months of staying still lean enough to be healthy, that is what's going to get you a ton of those gains. And consistency and momentum are a big part of that. To your current point, how do I say this in a polite way? I have a broad personality, and I got to kind of cut off some of the politically incorrect stuff depending on the podcast. You seem like a really nice person, so I'm gonna say this in as nice of a way as I can.
Just be yourself, Mike.
Oh, you don't want to say that. You'll have a lot of editing to do on the back end.
I see your wife laughing in the corner.
She knows. Yeah, ask her to be herself. That's another fun story. So, if you are not, as a pursuer of muscle and fitness, just a regular person going to the gym, if you are not able to be decently consistent, any conversation beyond you solving that problem, how many reps, how many sets, which exercise, what's your split, is just a conversation that's pointless to have.
It's for naught.
It is this, there's a condition there which doesn't make sense. It's kind of like talking to someone who's like, all right, so like, what type of like small, like private aircraft, like 2-engine, can I use a 3-engine option? What do you pay the crew? Blah, blah, blah. And you're like, are you in the market for a small plane? Like, no, not at all. Like, why the hell did I just talk to you for an hour about all these details?
Right.
Now, it's you say, listen, I have, $6 million squared away. I want to buy a Learjet. Now we're talking. So it's one of those things where there's a precondition to doing the thing. Sure. And consistency is the precondition to do the thing.
Yeah. Be prepared to make a commitment.
100%, because every single workout, 2 things. 1, every single workout only makes you a little bit more fit. So you need a lot of them. And 2, your body does this thing called involution in sports science. Your body doesn't like change. It needs a real consistent, strong stimulus. Like apparently when you coach chimpanzees from behind the camera in Hollywood.
You're not referring to the bodybuilders now.
No, correct. Okay. Also that. When humans smile, it's means they're happy. When the common chimpanzee smiles, it means they're baring their teeth and they're not having a good time, which is kind of scary.
Not good.
So apparently you have to yell at chimps from behind the camera. And that's how you get them to do the chimp smile on TV. And someone is be yelling at the chimp the entire time in a not fun way. If I was an actor next to chimp, I'd be like, are you sure he's not going to like it? So so the analogy there is kind of like you have to yell at the body for it to do stuff.
Sure.
And as soon as you stop yelling, which is training hard consistently, it goes back and goes, you know what? I'm good. And it kind of starts to go back to its normal self. Now it has a muscle memory, so regaining the lost gains is actually really rapid and really smooth. But it's just kind of go back to what it's doing. And so if you want to put in enough time, like, let's say we think of the body as kind of the muscle as kind of a cup full of water. Your water cup in your body has to have enough flow into it over time to fill up. Mm-hmm. But also there's a little spigot at the end and it always leaches out a little slow. So you stop and it leaches back down to a certain level.
Pumps and drains.
That's it. That's how the civil engineering's coming back. So one thing that you have to consider is, okay, I need enough sequential stimuli to build to something impressive. And if I ever back off for too long, I start to lose it.
That's right.
And it's not like there's this understanding that consistency is something bros and hardcore wrestling coaches from the 80s say just to bully kids. You got to be consistent. That's life. And, there's a lot to that, but there's literal science behind why consistency is the only path forward. So if you don't have the consistency, and I get, I try to be nice. I'll have people ask me with all the best intent, of course, reps and sets and all this stuff. Inevitably, I come back around. I'm like, how's your consistency? And like, yeah, well, haven't been hitting the gym as much as I should in the past couple months. And I was just like, why? Now, I like to talk from my own accord anyway. If you just left me in a room, I just talk to the mirror. But so I have a good time. But I kind of feel guilty because I didn't, for the amount of time they spent talking to me, like I'm Dr. Mike, I know things. they thought they were getting good information. And I wish I could given them better information. Like if I was like I had like an hour to Elon Musk and I was going, how exactly do you design the deep rocket parts? That's probably not a question I should be asking him, because I'm not trying to get into rocketry engineering anytime soon.
Right.
What I should be asking him is like, what are the core elements that make you so successful? And he'd have a lot to say about that. So when people ask you the minutia and the teeny little details, but they're not doing the big picture stuff, and they need a good damn talking to about the big picture stuff. After they finish the conversation, we chat and they're like, yeah, I haven't been too consistent. I'm kind of like, can I get a time machine, go back half an hour and then just point the finger at you and say, you need to get in the gym 4 times a week, XYZ. And here, last thing before I finish ranting, you don't have to get in the gym 6 or 7 times a week to see great results. And a lot of people just think you do. And they also think that as soon as you take a few days off, everything just goes away and you get weak and frail. And so they set these crazy expectations and then they go, well, I used to train, but I just got too busy. And I'm like running like 3 companies here. And I'm like, well, I have time to train. What the hell am I doing wrong? Am I just being lazy?
To train.
100%.
Yeah,
and you don't need much time. 2, 3, 4 days a week. Golden for almost everyone. It doesn't have to be 6.
100%. 100%. And, a lot of what you just said in terms of the consistency boils down to having some discipline. You have to have some
the D
discipline.
word.
The D word. Yeah, geez. And everybody likes to run away from that one these days. I want to talk a little bit about our training in the 80s and what some of the similarities and maybe not so similar things, because I know that we were kind of just talking around that a little bit in the gym the other day. And, what are you thinking, in terms of how has training from your perspective evolved over the last few decades into what it is today?
In a very grand sense of the evolution of complex systems, over time, most complex systems get much better over the long term. But over a shorter time scale, sometimes they're better earlier and worse later, and then really much better again. And so in some different facets of what training was like in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, 2020s, over the long term, on average, training's just gotten way better. I mean, go back to the 60s and ask the average person, how do you train? They're like, what's training? And they just walk off. And you're like, right, nobody trains still. Okay. People had all sorts of silly ideas. The 1950s machines where they would like tap your belly fat with the vibrator thing that does nothing.
Yeah, the vibrating machines.
Yeah, like I wish that worked. We just sit there and it feels great. It does nothing, unfortunately. So to me, the 80s weren't the pinnacle of how to train the best, but there are a couple of gems about 80s training that are now coming back a little bit, but they were missing for a few decades in some cases, in some circles. And so to me, one of those is in the 80s, and please just tell me if I'm totally wrong, because I was 6 years old in the 80s. I'm in the Soviet Union. I didn't know what training was. It seemed like people generally paid more attention to a full range of motion and good technique. Like I watch old videos of you, of Rich Gaspari, of Lee Haney, doing pull-ups with a full stretch, doing rows with a full stretch. Sometime in the late 90s, during the kind of first mass monster era,
sloppier,
it was just a bunch of like, what is this? Like a bunch of jerky, herky, and using as much weight as possible.
Sure.
It's cool to use the 180s for the incline dumbbell press. Fine. But if you're pressing like this, and you're like, oh man, my shoulders are killing me. It's like, you're half of Lee Haney's size, and he was using the 90s. Maybe you missed something there. And so all the videos I've seen of 80s train on magazines generally is kind of accepted that like more or less a full range of motion with an attention to good technique kind of just seemed like how people did things. It was the default. Now it's starting to get better, but in the 90s and early 2000s, it was actually the exception.
It got sloppy. A lot of what I call body English, which turns exercises into ballistic movements.
Yes.
Which increase the risk of injury considerably. So yes, I can tell you that one of the factors was the strict exercise form. It was for me, strict exercise form, full range of motion. Yep. And then you approach the weight, the selection of the weight as a tool.
Yes.
To stimulate the muscle, get it fatigued as fast as you could. Yep. And create the hypertrophy. But my goodness, the training style in the 90s, and I'm seeing some of the wreckage from that today. I'm not going to name any names, but guys that were the top of their game, through the 90s, and because of the training styles that they used, are experiencing all sorts of problems today. Hip replacements, spinal fusions,
Sure.
Artificial knees, and things like that.
100%. And I think maybe culturally some of that started with Dorian. But if you actually watch Dorian's videos, he went hard. He went heavy. But he always used really good technique.
Right.
I think some guys watched his videos, like we all watched Blood and Guts and everything like that. And they got the hard, like the psychological intensity. They absorbed that, wide-eyed staring at a screen. They got the heavy part. They absorbed that. But the good technique part, they sort of skipped over.
Right.
And so Dorian never trained sloppy, but the next generation, there was a lot of guys that trained really sloppy.
Yes.
And then there was another generation of guys that I had to contend with as I was coming up and growing as a person who lifted weights, who worshipped not Dorian, but Dorian's folks that came after.
Sure.
And those guys, they were like, yeah, man, but if XYZ bodybuilder lifts a ton of weight with a partial range of motion, that's right in the mid-range there, then if you're not the Olympia stage, you don't weigh 280, shut up, nerd, you don't know anything. It's like, you think you're going to look like Marcus Rule just because you're doing this herky stuff, which Marcus Rule actually didn't do himself. Like, you think you're going to be a mass monster because some mass monsters do this.
Sure.
But you're just a weak, skinny guy on way too many steroids who is just training like an idiot and has to have shoulder replacement surgery.
Yeah,
you're not that guy. And in the 80s, it just kind of seemed like there was this more common understanding of like good technique. I think if you were training around Lee Haney and Rich Gaspar and you, et cetera, and you saw someone that was pretty jacked using terrible technique, I think a lot of people would be like, what's that guy doing? Nowadays, it's better. But a few years back, a decade back, people would be like, man, I got to take notes. This guy's the man. Like, no. You can get really big and strong doing kind of dumb stuff. But there's a term in science and statistics called survivorship bias. I mean, if you send 100,000 people off to war, and 50,000 of them come back, 50,000 don't. But you just interview the guys that came back, war doesn't kill anybody. So if you see a huge guy in the gym who's using sloppy technique, you don't see the 10 other guys he used to train with that quit bodybuilding because they broke into pieces.
Right.
And if you actually know the sport, and you know the characters, you know the guys coming up through the national ranks, it's not the same guys every year. You see the guy who used to be second at Mr. USA's. Hey, you doing a show this year? No, man, I had to get my hip done, my knee done. And you're like, oh, okay. But here's the problem. When you're a person looking at YouTube videos, Instagram reels, back in our day, reading muscle magazines, you don't hear about the guys that didn't make it. You just hear about the guys that did. And if some of the guys that made it by chance used crap technique, you're going to be like, that's how you make it. It's a fundamental error of attribution. It's a big mistake. And the thing is, when you break yourself into pieces, having not become anyone yet, no one's going to remember you. You're not going to be that guy. So cool your jets. And for me, the big thing is it's the ego. Fundamentally, why are guys sometimes training with this herky-jerky bad technique? It's not because they have some kind of nuanced scientific validation of like, well, technically the sarcomere. No, none of that. It's an excuse to be the guy that leans on the rack, and instead of picking up the 60s and looking at the girl and she's like, and she walks off, you pick up the 120s and she's like, writes her number on there. That's how I think it happens in my head, right? And then all of a sudden, if someone gives you a justification to kind of do the dumb stuff that you want to do to begin with. And that's like, and then you look back and I remember watching the guys from the 80s and I'm like, oh my God, like just watching them train is like art. And they had gorgeous physiques. And I was like, something happened that wasn't good. And we'd lost something. And now we're gaining it back. A ton of the top pros, Hunter included, Nick Walker, et cetera, they train really well, really meticulously, really good technique.
They really do.
100%.
They really do. And people would be shocked at how little extraneous movement there is in the movements when Hunter performs them. It is so strict. It just reminds me of what we used to call continuous tension.
Sure.
In the exercise form.
Yep.
And it's just it's very controlled.
The thing with Hunter and a lot of the top pros nowadays is they're truly professional bodybuilders in the sense that they really care about the outcome and the process. And they really know what they're there for. If you talk to a pro race car driver and you're like, hey, can you do like a spin out? He'd be like, we don't try to do those because you're actually losing grip on the road. You don't go faster when you spin your tires out. But if you're a 16-year-old kid, all you want to do is spin out. If you come up to Hunter in the gym and you're like, what dumbbells are you using today? He's like, oh, I think about the 100s are going to be good for whatever shoulder press. And you're like, too big of a wuss to use the 120s. He's not even going to understand what you're saying.
No.
He'd be like, the 100 is the tool for the job.
Yeah, the 100.
Like if I was here to impress people,
exactly,
all I have to do is pull up my shorts, show you my quads, and you'll run away because his legs just don't make any sense at all.
They're from another planet.
Totally another planet, planet Labrada, I think. But it's just a matter of knowing what you're there for. I'm there to stimulate the muscle, and I don't care how much weight I use. I'm not there to do ego stuff. I'm not there to impress anyone. Because to be honest, the only impression that absolutely counts in bodybuilding is when you hit your mandatories in front of the judges.
Exactly.
And nothing else matters. Nowadays, we see that more. In the 90s and the early 2000s, we get a little bit away from that sort of situation. And I think, for the most part, people did great with it. Some people who you'll never hear of because they never made it to the top because they got broken halfway through, it never works out for them. Another thing about the 80s on a similar note, I don't know if this is true, it's just my suspicion, is there seemed to be a real respect for moderation on rep ranges and on volume. A lot of guys in the 80s seemed to do a lot of sets of 10-ish, 15-ish reps. They did some higher reps, they did some lower reps, but it wasn't like everyone's trying to do sets of 25 or everyone's trying to do sets of 5 because that's hardcore and you're strong.
Right.
And they weren't trying to do this thing where, forgive me if I'm mistaken about this, but like sort of in the Arnold era in the mid-early 70s, it was like if you were doing anything fewer than 20 working sets per muscle, you were just not serious.
That's right.
And then
I remember those days.
Yeah. And then with the Mike Menser crowd, there was a bit of an overcorrection to like, you got to train once every 2 weeks, one set. And you're like, really?
Yeah, that's
most of 80s training, kind of especially late 80s, was kind of a return of moderation.
I arrived at that point by trial and error myself.
Same.
Because I was a product early on of the late 70s where the 20 sets per body part.
Mm-hmm.
And then it evolved into, the Menser style, which
hit high intensity training.
And I adapted and created my own, which was 8 to 10 sets per body part, and I would pick probably 30% of those sets would be total failure.
Uh-huh.
Plus a forced rep or two,
Uh-huh.
That really helped. Mike, this has just been amazing today, man.
I mean,
you are just a wealth of information.
Where I've been making all the stuff up on the spot, never can tell.
Yeah, I don't think so. I want to encourage you guys to go check out Renaissance Periodization. Where do they find more information about your program?
Honestly, just go to YouTube and just type RP Strength. If you can spell Renaissance Periodization, God bless you.
RP Strength.
Yeah, RP Strength, one word.
On YouTube.
You'll see the channel. It's got a lot of subscribers. You'll see my ugly face. Click on my ugly face, turn up the volume. If you have children, turn the volume back down. And, everything starts with the channel, and then you'll get to click some links and maybe download the app and see what's going on.
Yeah, I would strongly encourage you guys to do that. There is so much great information, and it's free, guys. And then if you want to go to the next level, and I would encourage you to do that too, sign up for the program. Mike is just, he's an amazing trainer, an amazing wealth of information. Mike, any parting thoughts for the viewers?
For the viewers, keep tuning in to this podcast because
thank you.
There are younger folks with great podcasts that have a lot to teach, but there's nothing that can replace the wisdom of having done it. And I'll tell you this, definitely tune into the fitness stuff, but I know that your channel is more than fitness. It's about all kinds of different success and health and ability. And I got to be honest, this might sound a little weird, but like, I've never met you before. This is the first time we've met. We toured the facility, the whole thing. You just made it.
Thank you.
Period. Like, you're in your mid 60s, you're in phenomenal shape. You still have a head of hair, so I'm not pleased about that. And you just have this business empire. Everyone's ever interacted with you is a great guy. You've made, no doubt, tons of money, but also tons of meaningful success. You've left every relationship seemingly, for the most part, just like on a very, very good footing. And it's just kind of like, I don't know, like if everyone had to grade their lives against yours, we would all be failing.
You're very kind, Mike. I
real.
appreciate you. And, it's just, think it's a privilege to be able to work with people like you. When I got up this morning, I said to myself, I get to come into the studio today and I get to interview Mike, Dr. Mike. This is going to be amazing.
I woke up this morning and I was like, how does it make sense that I'm being interviewed by a guy I looked up to in muscle magazines when I was a teen? I still can't make sense of it. Huge pleasure, huge honor. And for the folks listening, keep listening to this guy. He knows a few things.
Thank you. Likewise. Now, one last question. Where do they find you on social media?
Oh, man. I'm just kidding. Instagram, all one word, because that's what Instagram is. Dr. Mike Israetel. And if you just type in Dr. Mike and you see my ugly face, it'll fill in the rest. You might learn something on there. YouTube's a better place for people to learn. Social media for me is like a place where you see me make an omelet and you're like, that man needs serious help in the cooking department. So if you want sympathy from me, come see me on social media.
Mike, this has been awesome today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Honors all mine.
Thank you. Hey guys, help us to grow the Lee Labrada Show by sharing this podcast with just one other person. Would you do it now? And be sure to hit the subscribe button and leave your comments and feedback below. All right, you guys, stay motivated, get up, and look up. God bless you.
The Lee Labrada Show.
Thunder from a distant shore. Voices in my head imprison me. Wanna hold me down, but I want more. You're the light that's cutting through my pain.